Hello and welcome. I'm super excited today to be talking about two of my favorite topics, data and data ops. And by data ops, I also include people out here. So it's really exciting for me to be talking about value creation using data. And this is so important because over the last 26 months, we have completely evolved into a contactless digital and a remote first world. We have started to transform the way we not only interact with people, but also the way that we have business and have transactions happen. Every industry has almost been impacted the most over the last 26 months. And the more important ones have been travel, retail, hospitality, and food, not to mention the healthcare industry, which is a completely different topic by itself. But these have fundamentally had to shift and change the way that they interact and the way that they handle the customer experiences. And there is one thread that connects the underlying changes through all of this, and that is data. And so it is so important to have access to this data and make those data-driven decisions and not just have emotional responses to the way that the environment is changing so hyper dynamically. And this is why it is so important for organizations to invest in data, not only to exist, but also to thrive and to survive. So today, I will be talking about two stories. The first story is going to be a transformational story around data democratization. The next one is going to be a cautionary tale and some of the challenges that we faced as we were transforming. And then finally, in the third part, what I want to do is I want to help provide tools and techniques and approaches, and especially a powerful framework that has helped us to drive and to promote and champion data democratization within our organization. So let's start off with the transformation story. And to set the context and to give a little bit of background, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Gautham Pallapa, and I'm the founder of Transformity, a thought leadership group that drives transformation through empathy and technology. I'm also an executive advisor at VMware, where I tie with executives and C-suite of various organizations on their transformation journey and try to help them. I have over 16 years of experience in the industry in various fields, and I've had the honor of leading and driving transformation and change for several mission-critical workloads, such as E911, healthcare, education, conferencing, collaboration, event management, disaster recovery, and so on. And I believe with this motto of mine to transform with empathy, and that is everything that I do. And today you will see that theme as we overlay data democratization and people and value creation. So in one of the roles that I was leading, I had this organization that had a suboptimal speed to value. From an SDLC perspective, we had a waterfall approach. The dev cycles were quick, but the software was waiting to be released. We had to play deployment Tetris, and so we had a lot of software rot and technical debt that was coming in. And I was leading product organizations as well. And so for me, when I release something into the market, it used to take me about 120 days to get feedback from the customer, whether this was actually a good feature or not. And it was not a very optimal way to develop and to release features and look for customer feedback. There was also very sparse application and event logs. There was poor data hygiene. We had stale data coming in. There were some data sources that I didn't even know existed. We had a lot of Excel files and macros and things were done on the desktop. And so it was a very frustrating way when it comes to observability and data hygiene. From an access perspective, getting approvals was frustrating to say the least. There was a slow approval process. It was very manual. We had multiple tickets that had to be generated. Denial of those tickets was the default. Usually when you submit something, you were sure that it would get rejected the first time, even though you would have provided the right information or what you thought was right information at that time. And then there was unrealistic interpretations of policies. In this particular organization, we had to be compliant with PCI DSS, HIPAA, high trust, and GDPR. And so, as you can imagine, there were a lot of complexities when it came to policies and governance and how to manage the data and how to ensure that the data was protected. And so, what happened more often than not was the people who were asking the data were rejected, A, because denial was default, but also because their intelligence was questioned. One of the most important, most common things that they gave was, oh, you don't know how to handle the data, so I'm afraid we can't let you have access to it. So it was really frustrating, and it was a very bureaucratic and unhappy situation, as you can imagine. So we decided that we need to democratize the data. That was one of the initiatives that I launched. Now, to put in perspective what I mean by data democratization, my definition of data democratization is that it is a continuous improvement process where we are entrusting organizational members with the necessary data and information to achieve their business outcomes. We are also enabling everyone with very technical knowledge to work with data comfortably so that they can be successful in their work and with their processes. We are empowering the people to share their validated learnings, be it from their successes or from their failures, openly and without fear. And finally, we are enhancing customer experience through feedback from these data insights and making those data-driven decisions. And this is what I define data democratization as. So we started off, we launched our approach, the data democratization journey. As you can expect, we invested in technology. We decided that we need to improve the data flows and the data processes that we currently have. There was a lot of manual overhead, and so we needed to reduce that and we can make it more systemic. And then we want to invest in the people. We wanted to focus on people and try to upskill them and help them understand and educate them about data and data hygiene and data management. And we said that if we invest in all these things, then in that case, people would be happy, we would have success, and data democratization would be a win. We started off with the technology, and we learned very quickly that technology by itself is really not going to help us. Because technology, I firmly believe, can only be an enabler, and it can accelerate to the outcomes that you want it to achieve, be they good outcomes or be they bad outcomes. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't judge. Technology is just an enabler. People are the real value creators. And this held really true to me, and it resonated deeply with me because of my fundamental beliefs. My first fundamental belief was that happy people are productive people. And my second fundamental belief is that strategic disruption, not disruption for the sake of disruption, but strategic disruption with a lot of planning is what leads to progress. And this really resonated with me that people are the true value creators because I was currently in an organization at that time that had a very unhappy workforce and people were not very happy. And so that impacted me. And we decided that we would go on this data democratization journey. We wanted to focus on work-life balance. That was the most important reason why we wanted to do it. We wanted to have people focus on their high-value activity, things that they feel is valuable. What they can provide as contribution is valuable to them. We wanted to increase automation and self-service. We also wanted to optimize the processes and improve the data flow within the organization. And so we did value stream mapping. We had process analysis and flow modernization as a initiative that we undertook in order to improve the flow of value within the organization. We then had psychological safety. We wanted to improve that psychological safety because we wanted to make people feel okay to fail and to share that failure. We wanted to reduce the stress and anxiety and frustration that was going on We wanted to help people to collaborate, to innovate, and to improve the speech value. And so we launched our data transformation. And the objectives were pretty simple. We only had three. The first one was to democratize. We wanted to remove the impediments. We wanted to provide better access to people, and we wanted to increase the accountability. The next one was to improve that speed to value. It was taking too much of time for us to get feedback and to get insights from the actions and from the features that we were releasing. So process optimization, flow modernization, and automation first approach was something that we wanted to introduce. And then finally, we wanted it to be data-driven. We did not want to have emotional or sentimental responses. We wanted to make it very objective and data-driven. And so we also wanted to bring in lean experimentation, we wanted to bring in innovation, and we wanted to make decision-making more data-driven in nature. And it felt like a really, really good thing to do. But when we started going down the route and started working on it, we ran into three major challenges. The first one is we realized very quickly that because of the data hygiene that we had and because of the quality of the data being so low within our organization, we could not trust the data. We had stale data, we had outdated and irrelevant data at times. In some places, it was distorted, so we didn't really know what the context was behind it. We had disparate data sources. There were some data sources that we found that were hooking into systems that we didn't even know the origination of. It was scary. Then we had low observability, and then the audit trails and the data trails were really, really bad. So the biggest challenge that we faced was that we couldn't trust the data. The next challenge that we had was the continuous theme of not being able to trust the people who would handle it or who would get access to the data. Remember, we had really limited access. And to be fair, we had low data literacy and a lower data skill set in some pockets of the organization. And that increased the challenge of not trusting people. One of the things that I continuously heard from the data team was that it takes more time for them to bring people up to speed and to troubleshoot the problems that they're creating rather than just creating it themselves. And so it became that bottleneck and it became really hard to overcome that problem. The third one was no direct access. And I talked about the various policies and governance rules that we had and audits that we needed to clear and we needed to make sure that we adhere to the regulations of. But at the same time, everything had to go through a data team, which created the bottleneck for that entire organization. Policy and governance was constantly quoted. Security was another reason that was quoted, or data privacy was another thing that was quoted as a reason for containing and creating that chokehold within the organization. But we felt that it was probably because it was easier to state that policy is preventing exposure and democratization of data rather than create and educate and enhance and develop those guidelines and best practices and hygiene for the data stewards. And this takes me to the next story, which is a cautionary tale. And I want to talk about this story, which is a legend of John Henry. According to folklore, John Henry was a great steel driver at the Big Bend Tunnel on the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. A steel driver is a person who hammered a steel rod into the rock to make holes so that they could put the blast charges or the explosives in it. And it was slow and painstaking work. And so the companies, they wanted to speed up the process. And as you can imagine, they decided to turn to technology to solve that problem. And that's where the steam drill came up. One day, John Henry's foreman, or captain, as he was called the team over and introduced them to a steam drill and said that this is the machine that is going to start drilling holes in the rock for inserting the explosives. it would ease their lives and it would try to help speed up the process. As you can imagine, it caused quite a consternation with the team. There's the folks tale and the poem is great, but basically John Henry told his captain, "A man ain't nothing but a man, but before I let your steam drill beat me down, I'll die with a hammer in my hand." And so with his dignity at stake, he challenged the steam drill to a race. So the steam drill started off, and so did John Henry. John Henry pounded until his hammer was striking fire and drove an accumulated length of 14 feet of steel. The steam drill, on the other hand, laid only 9 feet. And that was a huge win. John Henry beat the system. He beat the machine. And that was great. And then he asked for a cool drink of water. He laid down his hammer, and then he died. He was given a hero's burial. John Henry's tale is an amazing tale of human perseverance, of determination, and of grit. But at the same time, it's a cautionary tale that underscores 3 important challenges that learnings and observations that we can take from it. The first one is the importance of sustainable pace. Manual toil or manual processes, or in the world of data, things like Excel extracts and pivot tables and various manipulations will work for short stints, but at a very heavy cost. We need to make sure that whatever processes we are doing can be sustained, and therefore there is an importance of sustainable pace. The next one is we need to focus on the high value activity. For a steel worker, in their mind, it could be that driving the steel spikes would be the high value activity, but in reality, it is removing those impediments. It is putting those blast charges and blasting the rock is the higher value activity. And we need to help the systems and automation to handle those mundane tasks. So the second observation is to focus on the high value activity. The third one, and this is common across any kind of transformation, be it a digital transformation, be it a cultural transformation, an agile transformation, it has to do with us as people. Change is scary, but new does not have to be a threat. New means that there is an opportunity to upskill, to improve, to elevate, and to innovate. Especially when it comes to new technologies and new processes or new ways, considering data, when we are trying to open up, create new rules, create new processes, have more accountability. Having those new processes and approaches should not be a threat. It's an opportunity to have you focus on the high value activity and have other people upskill themselves, improve their processes, be more efficient, be more productive, innovate, and become those market differentiators. And the biggest challenge that one can face within an organization, or a limiting belief that challenges progress within an organization, is this statement: it has always been done this way. And that is crushing, and that limits innovation, that limits progress. And this is something that we need to overcome, especially as humans, and especially when we're trying to focus on value creation within an organization. And this is the crux of driving towards data democratization within an organization in this hyper-dynamic world. So with regards to the organization that we were in, here are some stats that I was able to collect. Before, I mentioned that it was taking 120 days from ideation to feedback. And there was only 12% of the people who actually needed the data access who had it. And of the 12%, the majority of them were actually the data sciences team. It took us an average of 16 tickets for one request to get data access. And it was very frustrating. It was a crazy process. for sure. And then when we did the value stream analysis, we found that we had 42 days of wait time within the process. And the record for the quickest turnaround in getting an access was 12 days. That is a really, really bad situation that we were in. But luckily, we were able to persevere, we were able to drive, we were able to educate people, elevate them, enable them, and empower people. And after a long journey of about 14 months, we got to this step. We got to 10 days from idea to feedback, which fit perfectly for us because we were doing 2-week iterations. And so this worked really well. They had a lagging window, and so we were able to quickly identify and we were able to release features or make changes to what the customer wanted within 2 iterations, and that was beautiful. Up to 87% of the people who needed to get access were able to get the right access with role-based access control. And in some cases, it hardly took a ticket to create because we started making it much more systemic and made it much more automated and system-driven and dashboard-oriented. Data visualization was something that we invested in a lot. And so on average, it was going to take about 1 ticket for a request, especially because we wanted to maintain those audit logs and we wanted to have proof of who requested what log. We enabled rules for self-service. We had almost no wait time and there was no bottleneck. And because of all of these, the customer satisfaction score increased 65%. And this was a beautiful thing for us. I was very proud about this entire data democratization effort that we had. So how do you go about introducing and driving data democratization strategically? And in this section, I am going to share various tools, tried techniques, and things that have been successful that have really changed the dialogue around data democratization, around data access, and made people feel much more comfortable around the request for data, around the goal of data democratization. So the first thing that we always need to start off with, and a place that we need to come from, is a place of value. This is what we need to emphasize on. What is the value that we are going to provide if we are going to democratize data? How is the organization going to benefit from it? What are the business outcomes that are going to be better? The next thing that we want to focus on is how is productivity going to improve? How are people going to be more efficient, more utilized, and try to turn around things quicker and have that work-life balance and reduce that stress and frustration within the organization? So value and then productivity. And out of that come all those processes and those self-service mechanisms that you want to drive. And depending upon what kind of productivity that you want to achieve and what kind of value you want to deliver, you have different kinds of processes and self-service mechanisms that you can provide to your organization. Now, it's not enough to have just these two. You need to make sure that there is accountability. You want to ensure that the right people have the right access. And it's not just the right people, it is the people who will have the necessary data, will have that limited access just for the data that they need. They don't need to query and get all kinds of data. There is a difference between necessary data and an overload of data or sufficient data. So we want to give them the necessary data for them to be successful and not just open up a Pandora's box and allow them to query any field that they would like. And out of these two comes governance. That is really critical and important, and we need to outline what governance measures and what countermeasures and how we're going to do audit logs and audit trails and all those various things as we are making a case for data democratization. Now, when we have accountability and we know the value that is being created, we know that different roles are going to provide different kinds of value. And this is where role-based access control comes into play. And we need to make it really important and very clear on what roles are essential and what roles are going to be super users, so to speak, or admins, so to speak. And again, we don't want to have a plethora of roles because that becomes a nightmare, a logistical overhead and a nightmare to handle. We want to do with the bare minimum. What is the simplest way in which we can implement role-based access control so that you can ensure that we have accountability and we have value? The other thing that we need to embrace, and this is something that governs all organizations, there are 6 unspoken laws as you are going through a data democratization approach, and actually any kind of transformation does. The first one is Murphy's Law, and this is tried and true law. It says that anything that go wrong will go wrong, so be prepared for that. The next one is the Pareto principle. Don't try to seek for those outliers or those fringe conditions. Try to solve for the 80% of the cases that you have. So for example, with role-based access control, try to identify those 20% of the roles that will actually meet 80% of the conditions. You don't have to create very specialized, customized roles or a one-off role for people because then, as I said, it becomes a logistical overhead. Next, we need to really embrace Conway's law, which states that organizations design systems which mimic the organization. So if you want to have a flatter, much more smoother flow of data and of data hygiene and better quality of data and quicker data within your organization, you need to make sure that you abide by Conway's law and you make it much more flatter. The easier that you can get to the data, the necessary data and the right kind of data, the better it is going to be. Now, the fourth one is called Brooks' Law. And this is more about implementation of the data processes or trying to introduce new templates or basic enhancements. And Brooks' Law states that adding more people to a late project is only going to make it later. And this comes from his book, The Mythical Man Month, where we need to be very cognizant of the fact that if we have a data initiative or some process that is going on and it is backed up and it's going to be slowed down, that it's already delayed, adding more people to it is not going to make the project or that particular initiative or the ticket go faster. The fifth one is Goodhart's Law. And this is essential when you're trying to measure the success of data democratization within the organization. Goodhart's Law states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. And a good story is said that in the Soviet Union, there used to be factories that used to manufacture all these screws or nails and so on. And so a measure of success was the length of the screws or the length of the nails that were being made. And so you had this extremely long nails that were being created because then that would show that there was a lot of productivity. On the other, the people realized it very quickly and decided to change the metric and said that the number of widgets or things that were being created would be the measure of success. And as you can imagine, you had this really tiny screws and nails that started being created because that would increase the productivity up. So again, we don't want to have vanity metrics. We don't want to have metrics and measures for the sake of having it, but we want to ensure that we're actually driving to the right behavior and the right things. And then lastly, Metcalfe's Law. And this is really important, especially when we are talking about so many applications and devices and interactions and APIs that are coming together and creating those event streams and generating data. And you have so many subscribers out there. But in addition to that, you have so many disparate sources that are popping up. So Metcalfe's Law says that the more devices connected to a network, the more useful it becomes. But I'd like to add a caveat to it and say that this holds true only if the devices actually are connected together and have a convenient flow of valuable data, and there is no degradation of the signal to noise ratio within your organization. So make sure that as you are bringing in more data sources or you're having more event streams or more subscribers and publishers, that there is a cohesion and there is a reason around it. The rallying or the thing that ties all of these things together must be the business outcome or the value that this particular data or this event stream is bringing. The other thing that I would say, apart from having these unspoken laws and talking about the value and the accountability and the productivity, is that you want to have empathy as a core tenet. Customer empathy is the most important thing. We talk about it a lot. Almost every design thinking organization or any product driven organization focuses on customer empathy. There are some that are customer obsessed, but the goal is that your value of your organization is by reducing the pain that a customer is going through in some way, shape, or form, or probably enhancing the experience of the customer. And so you need to have customer empathy, and that is table stakes. I would say, in addition to that, we want to have employee empathy. There is a lot of pain and frustration and manual toil that's going on within our processes in an organization. We want to make sure that we have empathy, not only for the people who are requesting the access. So, for example, the manual toil that is taken by creating those 16 tickets or whatever to get access for something to help them be good at what they do or good at their jobs, or to meet their business outcomes. But also empathy for the data stewards and the people who are managing the data. Yes, maybe the process is extremely frustrating and it is probably suboptimal, but there is probably a reason how this process evolved. So getting frustrated at the people and not empathizing with the people who are living in that kind of a process doesn't help anyone. Instead, we want to extend that empathy, try to put ourselves in their shoe and try to understand what life is like in their viewpoint or in their world, and work collaboratively to improve and elevate themselves. And then you can really improve the process. You can increase the optimization and the utilization of the processes and modernize the flow, not only of data, but also of value within the organization. And the third one is actually organizational empathy. If you're living in an organization, an enterprise especially, and there's a lot of legacy and technical debt, it is going to be slow to bring in change. So I allude this to a super tanker that needs to make a turn mid-ocean. It needs to overcome the current momentum that it has, the inertia that it currently has, and then make a wide turn. And it is going to be extremely slow, but eventually it will turn. And this is what we need to give. We need to provide leeway for the organization. It's going to take time. We're going to fail. It is going to be frustrating for a while. We are going to question things like, how do they not understand that data democratization is so important? Or how do they not understand that all we are doing is trying to protect our organization and be good stewards? These are things that will come up. And so we need to have empathy for the organization as well. And we want to do it by providing more information and knowledge to the people, both the people who are requesting the access, but also the people who are managing the data and who have to grant access. And when we come from this place of empathy, we are going to have trust and respect. It's going to build. And when we are going to have that team bonding, we will have collaboration, we'll have communication. And when we have that trust and respect, we're going to start seeing that psychological safety. We're going to build those safe environments. We're going to enable people. People will feel much more calmer and they're open to suggestions. And there'll probably also be lower attrition because people are feeling more comfortable there. And that creates innovation. People are able to take risks. People are able to experiment. You don't have to initiate a huge project for doing it. You can do small, quick returns and you will reap the benefits out of it. People will start feeling comfortable for failure. And when that happens, you're going to start seeing that positive culture. You're going to break those silos. You're going to have that learning culture. We're going to drive democratization of any of those initiatives that we want. And overall, we're going to have happy people. I also want to say that, and this is a common limiting belief that many people have, you do not need to have a title or permission to lead with empathy. Your actions to improve human quality of life is what makes you an empathic leader. So don't sit back and wait for someone to come and try to help you. You don't need that permission. You don't need a title. What you want to do, where you want to go, how you're going to collaborate, and the goodness that, or the value that the entire organization is to get at the end of it is going to help you. And that's what makes you a very empathic leader. So here's a framework that has really helped us to help drive this request for data or to drive data democratization within organizations. I've tried it in a number of other places, and we've been successful getting to similar returns and results. And so it's been battle hardened. So I'd like to share it with you all, and I hope it helps you on your data democratization journey. I call it power, or it's a powerful request of data, because the first thing you want to do is start with the purpose. You want to clearly articulate the why. Why do we need access to the data? It's not just because you want it. There has to be a compelling reason to need it, to get access to the data. The next one is the outcome. What benefits are we going to get if we get access to the data? What are the business outcomes that it would drive? Tie it to the value. How would the customer benefit from it? This is really important because you need to tie it to value and you need to tie it to outcomes. The third one is to emphasize what's in it for them. What's in it for the people who are the data stewards and who are the data managers? Why should they be motivated to grant access? And there are multiple ways that you could talk about it. A is to reduce the WIP limit or the work in process limit, reduce the number of tickets that are going to come, to increase the self-service capabilities, and to upskill them and make them tier 3 support, for example, so that they are consulted only when really important things are needed or when something is fundamentally broken. It helps them improve their work-life balance. There are so many reasons that you can provide that will help them motivate, help them get motivated to grant access. The next one is to educate. How are you going to educate the workforce? What are the standards? What are the policies? What are the regulations? How are you going to have a continuous education mechanism to uplift and elevate the workforce who may have low data literacy or who may have low technical skill set to handle this? What are the governance mechanisms? How is the data hygiene going to be handled? How will data processing work? What are the flows that are needed? We need to ensure that there are ways and countermeasures to have all these things in an educational way. And then lastly, you want to specify on the role clarity. You want to ensure and tell these are the roles and permissions that we want to introduce as part of data democratization. The accountability, who has access? How will the audit logs work? What are the systems that are going to be put in place to ensure that the right people have the permissions and are in the right roles? The processes to add and remove people, for example. Regular audits of who has permissions and to prune the list of people who are in the roles. Maybe someone has left the organization, someone got added. And so these are the things that we want to say up front and make it very clear when we are submitting the request for data access. And I call this power, the purpose, outcomes, what's in it for me, educate, and role clarity. So that makes it power. So I'm hoping this framework will really help you. But when you're starting off on this journey, I do want to say that you're going to fail a lot, and that's okay. We learn through failure and we grow through failure, because failure of one team is validated learning for the entire organization. So make sure that you share this failure within the organization. And when you are failing, and you're failing fast, you're failing often, and you're failing cheap, you are not only celebrating failure, you are creating that psychologically safe environment within your organization to provide permission to other people to fail as well. And that's going to elevate the conversation and make things much better. Because it's not enough for us to go the same way that we've gone over the last number of years, trying to use the same approaches in the past. We need to really take a step back and rethink and reimagine the way that we approach data democratization. It is critical and it is vital. And this is something that we must have within our organizations. And so we need to identify not only the ways to have data democratization, but also champions who can help drive it. And so we need to rethink and reimagine the way that we approach it. And a big bang approach is not the solution. We want to start small. Remember, change is uncomfortable. It makes people insecure. It also makes people very, very resistant. And so we want to start small. We want to bring them in, identify the value that they will get. And more often than not, it is to reduce that manual toil. And so focus on that, start small, improve the communication and transparency within the organization. Do those lean experiments that you want to do. You can have small experiments in quick bursts, mostly hypothesis driven. And again, this is a very data driven technique. And this will help you dog food or walk the talk, so to speak. And the more important thing is to celebrate those failures and successes and do it publicly within the organization. We used to have a failure wall where we used to have cards which talked about all the failures that we had within our teams. We also ensured that we were talking about at least one or two failures in the town halls that I was having, or in the lean coffees that we were conducting. And then share it. If possible, if there are things that have actually worked within your organization, share. There are a number of ways that you can do. Here are a couple of hashtags that you can have. Obviously, DataOps is close to me, so DataOps is one thing. Leading with empathy is another, because one of the things that I promote a lot is any kind of transformation journey, especially data democratization, is rooted in empathy. And so leading with empathy is another hashtag that you can use. Transformity, it's my organization. We're a thought leadership group, so that helps as well. And so you can drive and you can try to use these hashtags if you like. Obviously, anonymize anything. Do not state names if you don't have to. Feel free to share with us, with the world, or share it with me as well. I would love to hear those stories, and then learn about it and feel so excited about the innovative and amazing things that you have been able to accomplish within your organization. I want to leave you with a reflection. We've talked a lot about why data democratization is important, why it is rooted in value, how people are the true value creators, and what frameworks we need to use in order to champion and drive data democratization within our organization. So I want you to reflect upon all of these and think about how you will champion data democratization within your organization and how you will enhance the dialogue, elevate it, and drive towards those high-value activities for your organization and provide the necessary data access for those insights that will help become that market differentiator for your organization. If you would like to hear more about different techniques, especially around transformation and lean agile and DevOps, I have a book. It's called Leading with Empathy, Understanding the Needs of Today's Workforce, where I go into much more detail about all of these things. These books have calls to actions. They have techniques. They have experiments, things that have actually worked in my journey throughout my career. The other thing that I would like to say is, if you do purchase this book, please note that a large portion of the royalty that comes out of this book is actually going to nonprofits that will help the underprivileged, the underrepresented minorities, and the homeless. So by purchasing this book, you're actually performing a random act of kindness, and you're helping improve human quality of life. So thank you for having me. I hope this has been really helpful around the people portion and the value creation of data democratization and data ops. I'm once again super excited to be here as part of the Data Ops Summit 2022. And thank you for having me.